New notions of kingship. देखिए, chiefs and kings in the south. The new kingdoms that emerged in the Deccan and further south, including the chiefdoms of the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas in Tamilakam. The name of the ancient Tamil country, which included parts of present-day Andhra Pradesh and Kerala, in addition to Tamil Nadu, proved to be stable and prosperous. तो अब हमने देखा कि मॉडर्न एम्पायर was there for about 150 years and धीरे धीरे करके फिर वो डिक्लाइन होता गया. It lost its control. New chiefdoms and kingdoms emerge होने लग गए. And the new chiefdoms that emerged were in the Deccan, that were the chiefdoms of Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas in Tamilakam. Of course, Tamilakam, which is the present day Tamil Nadu. ओके जिसमें आज उस टाइम पर जो तमिलकम होता था उसमें आंध्र प्रदेश केरला के पार्ट्स भी होते थे एंड ये बहुत ही स्टेबल भी थे, प्रॉस्परस भी थे. सो जो ये चेरास, चोलास, पांड्यास के जो किंगडम्स है फिर ये थोड़े धीरे धीरे करके रिप्लेस करते गए. Chiefs and chiefdoms. A chief is a powerful man whose position may or may not be hereditary. He derives support from his kinfolk. His functions may include performing special rituals, leadership in warfare, and arbitrating disputes. He receives gifts from his subordinates, unlike kings who usually collect taxes and often distributes these amongst his supporters. Generally, there are no regular armies and officials in chiefdoms. So, आप compare कर सकते हो what is the difference between a king and a chief. एक चीफ का पोजीशन हेरिडिटरी हो सकता है, नहीं भी हो सकता है, बट ये टैक्सेस वगैरह कलेक्ट नहीं करते. जो भी चीफ्स को मिलता है वो एज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ गिफ्ट्स मिलता है, उसको भी वो चीफ जो है वो डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर लेते हैं अमंग द सपोर्टर्स. एंड कोई रेगुलर ऐसी आर्मीज़ नहीं होती, कोई ऑफिशियल्स नहीं होते हैं चीफ टर्म्स में, मतलब चीफ्स का जो एरिया होता है. We know about these states from a variety of sources. For instance, the early Tamil Sangam text contain poems describing chiefs and the ways in which they acquired and distributed resources. हमने अभी तक देखा कि मॉडर्न्स के क्या क्या सोर्सेज थे मॉडर्न डायनेस्टी को कंस्ट्रक्ट करने में. ऐसे ही ये जो नए किंगडम्स और चीफडम्स हुए थे, न्यू नोशंस ऑफ ये जो किंगशिप थी, इसको कंस्ट्रक्ट करने के हमारे पास क्या क्या सोर्सेज थे, तो वो एक तमिल संगम टेक्स्ट से हमें मिलते हैं. Many chiefs and kings, including the Satavahanas, who ruled over parts of western and central India, 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE, and the Shakas, a people of Central Asian origin, who established kingdoms in the northwestern and western parts of the subcontinent. The Shakas जो थे वो Central Asian origin के थे. They were from not Indians originally, मतलब native Indians नहीं थे, but they established control in the northwestern parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and western parts of the subcontinent also. And they derived revenues from long distance trades. Their social origins were often obscure, but as we will see in the case of the Satavahanas, once they acquired power, they attempted to claim social status in a variety of ways. तो मतलब उनके सोशल ओरिजिन्स जो थे कि वो कहाँ से थे, वो कौन सी कास्ट को बिलोंग करते थे, इट इज़ नॉट वेरी वेल नोन. एंड बहुत ज़्यादा हम कह सकते हैं कि एकदम लेजिटिमेट रूल नहीं था कि जैसे कि डायनेस्टिक रूल नहीं था. लेकिन एक बार उनके पास पावर आने लग गई, देन ऑफकोर्स इस्टेब्लिश एन एम्पायर, उनका कंट्रोल, एंड देन इट देयर वाज अ वे कि वो लेजिटिमाइज हो गया. कैप्चरिंग द एलिफेंट्स फॉर द आर्मी. ये अर्थशास्त्र में देर आर माइन्यूट डिटेल्स ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव एंड मिलिट्री ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, एंड दिस इज व्हाट इट सेज अबाउट हाउ टू कैप्चर एलिफेंट्स. दिस पॉइंट कि सिर्फ और सिर्फ एलिफेंट्स को कैप्चर करने के लिए देर आर माइन्यूट डिटेल्स अबाउट हाउ टू गो अबाउट द प्रोसेस, मीन्स कि पूरा एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन वॉज वेल लेड आउट, वेल प्लान्ड. हर डिटेल को कंसिडरेशन में लेकर द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन वॉज बीइंग डन. The guards of elephant forest, assisted by those who rear elephants. देखिए पूरे सोर्स का एक ही मतलब है, to show the well established structure जिसके ऊपर पूरा के पूरा एम्पायर रन हो रहा था. ऐसा वेग नहीं था, ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं था कि the ruler is doing whatever he or she wants to do. तो मतलब ये है कि there was everything was properly planned. By those who rear elephants, those who enchain the legs of elephants, those who guard the boundaries, those who live in forest, as well as by those who nurse elephants, shall, with the help of 5 or 7 female elephants to help in tethering wild ones, trace the whereabouts of the herds of elephants by following the course of urine and dung left by the elephants. According to Greek sources, the Mauryan ruler had a standing army of 600,000 foot soldiers, 30,000 cavalry, and 9,000 elephants. Some historians consider these accounts to be exaggerated. 600,000, 30,000, ये थोड़ा, some historians think that it is little more, way over the line, exaggerated है, इतने होते नहीं थे, but of course we don't know the reality. If the Greek accounts were true, what kinds of resources do you think the modern ruler would have required to maintain such a large army? देखिए अगर हम गेस कर सकते हैं, of course a lot of money, finances, then cavalry, मतलब horses, elephants, then of course bows, arrows, arms and ammunitions, weapons, food sources पूरी soldier को feed करने के लिए, पूरी army को feed करने के लिए. दे हैव टू बी सुपरवाइजर्स जो कि आर्मी के भी छोटे छोटे होते थे, उनके क्लोथ्स वगैरह, उनकी आर्म्स, अम्यूनिशंस, वेपन्स, फूड, फाइनेंस, उनके रहने की जगह, टेंट्स एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. जब वो बैटल में जाते थे तो द थिंग्स दैट हैव टू बी रेडिली नीडेड, ओके, उनके सेटलमेंट्स के लिए. ऑल दीज थिंग्स मस्ट हैव बीन एंड मैनी मोर थिंग्स. Divine kings. One means of claiming high status was to identify with a variety of deities. This strategy is best exemplified by the Kushanas, 1st century BCE to 1st century CE, who ruled over a vast kingdom extending from Central Asia to northwest India. Their history has been reconstructed from inscriptions and textual traditions. Inscriptions और textual traditions से जो कि उनका vast kingdom था, Central Asia से northwest India तक extend करा था कुशानास का kingdom. And कुशाना से हम डिवाइन किंगशिप का ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट है बहुत ईजिली आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं. द नोशंस ऑफ किंगशिप दे विश टू प्रोजेक्ट आर परहैप्स बेस्ट एविडेंस्ड इन देयर कॉइन्स एंड स्कल्पचर. Colossal statues of Kushana rulers have been found installed in a shrine at Mat, near Mathura, Uttar Pradesh. Similar statues have been found in a shrine in Afghanistan as well. Some historians feel this indicates that the Kushanas considered themselves godlike. Many Kushana rulers also adopted title Devaputra or son of God, possibly inspired by Chinese rulers who call themselves sons of heaven. तो जो कुशाना रूलर्स के स्टैचूज़, और वो स्टैचूज़ भी ऑर्डिनरी स्टैचूज़ नहीं थे. द स्टैचूज़, द स्कल्पचर शो दैट द रूलर्स वर वेरी मच गॉड लाइक. उनको इस तरीके से पोर्ट्रे किया जाता था इन स्कल्पचर्स में, इन स्टैचूज़ में. एंड ऑल्सो द कुशाना रूलर्स कॉल देमसेल्व्स सन्स ऑफ गॉड, देवपुत्र. एंड इट मे हैव बीन डिराइव्ड क्योंकि चाइनीज़ रूलर्स जैसे अपने आप को सन्स ऑफ हेवन बुलाते थे. सो इट मे बी पॉसिबल दैट द कुशाना रूलर्स टू उन्होंने भी कुशाना रूलर्स ने भी यही एक टाइटल अडॉप्ट किया था, देवपुत्र. By the 4th century, there is evidence of larger states including the Gupta Empire. Many of these depended on samantas, men who maintained themselves through local resources including control over land. They offered homage and provided military support to rulers. Powerful samantas could become kings. Conversely, weak rulers might find themselves being reduced to the position of subordination. तो samantas होते थे, उनके control of land होता था, उनकी खुद की army होती थी, and वो क्या करते थे, rulers को support करते थे, अपनी military देते थे. तो एक king होता था, तो किंग जो थे वो समंतास की हेल्प से रूल करते थे. अगर समंतास बहुत पावरफुल हो जाए तो ऐसा होता था कि वो किंग को हरा के खुद उसकी पोजीशन ले ले, या अगर किंग्स बहुत वीक हो जाते तो ऐसा होता था कि कोई दूसरा समंता आ जाए, किंग्स को की पोजीशन से हटा के उसको समंता की पोजीशन देते, उनकी पोजीशन जो है वो डिक्रीज़ हो जाए. ओके, तो गुप्ता एम्पायर और भी मोर वास्ट एम्पायर था, ज़्यादा था मॉडर्न से. And histories of the Gupta rulers have been reconstructed from literature, coins and inscriptions including prashastis, composed in praise of kings in particular and patrons in general by poets. देखिए आपको हर किसी का याद रखना है. मॉडर्न से हमें किस बारे में पता चलता है, इंस्क्रिप्शन से, स्टैचू से, स्कल्पचर से, क्या क्या चीज़ें हैं जिनसे हमें मॉडर्न्स के बारे में पता चलता है. कुशानास का हमने पढ़ा कि थ्रू कॉइन्स एंड स्टैचूज, स्कल्पचर हमें पता चलता है. गुप्तास का हमने पढ़ा थ्रू कॉइन्स, इंस्क्रिप्शंस एंड प्रशस्तीज. एक नई चीज़ आई है प्रशस्तीज, हमने एक हिंदी वर्ड है प्रशंसा, मीन्स टू प्रेज. सो प्रशस्तीज वर रिटन इन द प्रेज ऑफ द रूलर्स और मे बी द हायर ऑफिशियल्स या बहुत ही रिच कोई पेट्रन्स, जिसने भी जिसने भी इसको कमीशन करा कि ओके यू राइट अ प्रशस्ति फॉर मी, तो उनकी प्रेज में, उनकी प्रशंसा, उनकी प्रेज में जो कुछ लिखा जाता था दैट वाज नोन एज प्रशस्ति. तो यू हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल. आपको याद रखना पड़ेगा कि कौन से एम्पायर, कौन से रूलर का क्या सोर्स है जिससे हमें इस एम्पायर के बारे में पता चलता है. While historians often attempt to draw factual information from such compositions, those who composed and read them often treasured them as works of poetry rather than as accounts that were literally true. तो historians, हम लोग तो यही कोशिश करते हैं कि जितनी भी प्रशस्तीज, इंस्क्रिप्शंस वगैरह हैं उनसे फैक्चुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन डिराइव कर सके. बट ऑफ कोर्स जो लोग उसको कंपोज करते थे, they rarely saw them as फैक्चुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन. उसको लिटररी ट्रू अबाउट फैक्ट्स को छोड़ के वो उनकी प्रेज में लिखी जाती थी. तो वो अकाउंट्स, टाइटल्स मन से ऐड कर दिए जाते थे, उनकी प्रेज में लिखी जाती थी. दे वर रादर वर्क्स ऑफ पोएट्री, उनकी तारीफ में लिखी जाती थी. द प्रयाग प्रशस्ति ऑल्सो नोन एज द इलाहाबाद पिलर इंस्क्रिप्शन, क्योंकि वो इलाहाबाद में एक पिलर के ऊपर मिली है, दैट्स व्हाई इट्स नोन एज इलाहाबाद पिलर इंस्क्रिप्शन or known as Prayag Prashasti. It was composed in Sanskrit by Harishen, the court poet of Samudragupta, arguably the most powerful of the Gupta rulers, 4th century CE in a case in point. तो हम देखेंगे, हमने देखा कि 321 BCE से मौर्यन एम्पायर इस्टेब्लिश हुआ, चंद्रगुप्ता ने एम्पायर को इस्टेब्लिश करा, फिर अबाउट 150 ईयर्स तक, अबाउट 150 BCE तक मौर्यंस का एम्पायर चला. इसके बाद धीरे धीरे वो एम्पायर डिक्लाइन हो गया. चोलास, चेरास, पांड्यास जैसे बाकी चीफ्स एंड किंग्स जो है वो पावर में आ गए, एंड स्लोली अब हम आ गए हैं कुशाना रूलर्स हो गए. सतवाहनास फ्रॉम 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE, कुशानास फ्रॉम 1st century BCE मतलब 100 BCE to 100 CE, एंड हम आ चुके हैं गुप्ता एम्पायर पर जो कि 4th century CE में एग्जिस्ट कर रहा है, मतलब आज से अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 1600 ईयर्स पहले, ओके 1600 ईयर्स पहले. एंड उसके मोस्ट पावरफुल रूलर्स समुद्रगुप्ता कंसिडर करे जाते हैं, तो उनकी प्रेज में हरिशेन, उनके कोर्ट पोइट ने प्रयाग प्रशस्ति लिखी है. ओके, लेट्स डिस्कस दिस. द पांड्या चीफ Senguttuvan visits the forest. This is an excerpt from the Silappatikaram, an epic written in Tamil. ठीक है, क्या लिखा है इसमें पढ़ते हैं. When he visited the forest, people came down the mountain singing and dancing. Just as the defeated show respect to the victorious king, so did they bring gifts: ivory, fragrant wood, fans made of the hair of deer, honey, sandalwood, red ochre, antimony, turmeric, cardamom, pepper, etc. They bought coconuts, mangoes, medicinal plants, fruits, onions, sugarcane, flowers, areca nut, bananas, baby tigers, lions, elephants, monkeys, deer, musk deer, fox, bear, deer, musk deer, fox, peacocks, muskrat, wild cocks, peking parrots, etc. What is this? This is a very simple account जो ये बताता है कि एक पांड्या चीफ है जिसका नाम है सेंगुत्तवन. ओके, पांड्या चीफ तमिलकम वाले एरिया में ये चीफ्स थे, पांड्या, चोलास, चेरास. दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट कि जब वो चीफ मतलब जब वो फॉरेस्ट विजिट करने आया टू विजिट द कॉमन मैन, आप देख सकते हो कि व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट थिंग्स जो लोगों ने उस चीफ को ऑफर की. फ्रॉम पेपर, फ्रॉम cardamom to animals to areca nut is supari, bananas, fruits, vegetables, expensive gifts like woods and fragrant woods and ivory and fans. मतलब ये कितनी सारी चीज़ें from A to Z, all expensive, inexpensive, छोटी से छोटी चीज़ जैसे कि पेपर, अ सिंपल स्पाइस तक वो चीफ को ऑफर करते हैं. सो दिस वाज जस्ट अ वे ऑफ शोइंग एंड ट्रिब्यूटिंग देयर चीफ कि ओके वी हैव दिस. इट डजेंट मैटर कि आप क्या लेकर आ रहे हो, द फैक्ट दैट यू आर ब्रिंगिंग समथिंग एज अ गिफ्ट, इट वाज सीन एज gesture for tribute and respect. Why did people bring these gifts? What would the chief have used these for? So हम ये of course डिस्कस कर चुके हैं कि चीफ्स उसको अपने सपोर्टर्स में बांट देते थे, उसको डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर देते थे. सो इट मतलब ये सारी चीज़ें बहुत ज़्यादा तो चीफ के ऑफ कोर्स यूज़ में नहीं आएगी, व्हाट वुड ही डू ऑफ पेपर एंड ऑल, बट दीज वर एज अ गिफ्ट, these were given as a tribute. This is a Kushana coin. Observe King Kanishka and this is a deity. तो हम देखेंगे कि यह King Kanishka and deity मतलब वो अपने आप को एक deity जैसा मान रहा है and show कर रहा है that okay he is also god like or appointed by God and like that. Okay, तो king को कैसे पोर्ट्रे किया गया है, दिस इज़ अ क्वेश्चन. देखिए king is shown powerful, इसके more than okay there are two hands, इसके flowing hair है, he standing tall and brave, and I think there's a ruler in his hand, there's something in this hand also, so he's shown very brave like and chivalrous. This is sandstone sculpture of Kushana king. Elements of the sculptures that suggest this is an image of a king. क्या क्या elements है sculpture के देखिए. First of all, the dress, the sword in the hand, another one in this hand there, this the sculpture is standing upright and very brave and stiff, and the legs and all these things इससे portray हो रहा है कि कहीं ना कहीं okay he is the king. Okay, एंड इसके ऊपर कुछ लिखा भी हुआ है, यहाँ पर आप देख सकते हैं. तो ऑफ कोर्स एक्सक्यूवेशंस में बहुत बार ऐसा होता है, एंड इसमें भी ऐसा हुआ है कि द हेड हैज़ ब्रोकन ऑफ समवेयर, एंड ये कंप्लीट नहीं हो पाया. इसके आर्म्स या कुछ शोल्डर्स वगैरह भी बहुत अच्छे से नहीं कंप्लीटली एक्सकवेट नहीं हो पाए. बट दिस इज़ ऑफ अ कुशाना किंग. वो हम कैसे पता करते हैं? बिकॉज बाकी हमने और स्कल्पचर्स एंड स्टैचूज जो निकले हैं उससे कंपेयर कराएं. यहाँ पर पढ़ते हैं. दिस इज़ एन एक्सर्प्ट फ्रॉम द प्रयाग प्रशस्ति विच वॉज रिटन बाय हरिशीना इन संस्कृत समुद्रगुप्ता. कैसे वो प्रेस करते हैं समुद्रगुप्ता को? लेट्स सी. ही वॉज विदाउट एन एंटागनिस्ट ऑन अर्थ. ही, by the overflowing of the multitude of many god qualities adorned by hundreds of good actions, has wiped off the fame of other kings with the soles of his feet. He is Purusha, that is the supreme being the cause of the prosperity of the good and the destruction of the bad. He is incomprehensible. He is one whose tender heart can be captured only by devotion and humility. He is possessed by compassion. He is the giver of many hundred thousands of cows. His mind has received ceremonial initiation for the uplift of the miserable, the poor, the forlorn, and the suffering. He is resplendent and embodied kindness to mankind. He is equal to the gods Kuber, the god of wealth, Varuna, the god of the ocean, Indra, the god of rains, and Yama, the god of death. Very clearly इसमें बहुत ही गॉड लाइक सा पोर्ट्रेचर हमें यहाँ पर दिख रहा है इस समुद्रगुप्ता का. सो वी कैन से कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा factually true नहीं है, but it's more like a poetry. This is very evident if we read this excerpt. Okay. Why do you think the kings claimed divine status? This may be because to legitimize their rule. ये दिखाने के लिए कि yes, their rule was very legitimate. Okay. A changing countryside. Popular perceptions of kings. What did subjects think about their rulers? Obviously, inscriptions do not provide all the answers. In fact, ordinary people rarely left accounts of their thoughts and experiences. Nevertheless, historians have tried to solve this problem by examining stories contained in anthologies such as the Jatakas and the Panchatantra. Many of these stories probably originated as popular oral tales that were later committed to writing. The Jatakas were written in Pali around the middle of the first millennium CE. Jatakas जो थी, they were form of story. जैसे पंचतंत्र हम पढ़ते हैं, वैसे Jatakas भी were stories that were written in the language Pali around middle of the first millennium CE. That is approximately 500 CE around में लिखी गई थी Jatakas. Now the point is कि यहाँ पर हमें ordinary people के बारे में ज़्यादा पता नहीं लगता है, because the inscriptions, the text, everything that was written was being commissioned by the ruler or a rich patron. तो ordinary लोग क्या सोचते थे king के बारे में, how they viewed the king, वो हमें पता नहीं चलता, because there is not much information about that. बट उसको सॉल्व करने की कोशिश करी है. हिस्टोरियंस हैव ट्राइड टू गेट इनटू द स्टोरीज, क्योंकि ये जो स्टोरीज पंचतंत्र जटाका स्टोरीज है, इसमें कॉमन मैन के बारे में बहुत कुछ है. सो इसके थ्रू हम हिस्टोरियंस कोशिश करते हैं कि ऑर्डिनरी मैन क्या सोचते थे, उनकी थिंकिंग कैसी थी, उसके बारे में जान सकें. Here's an example. There's one story known as the Gandatindu Jataka, describes the plight of the subjects of a wicked king. These included elderly women and men, cultivators, herders, village boys, and even animals. When the king went in disguise to find out what his subjects thought about him, each one of them cursed him for their miseries, complaining that they were attacked by robbers at night and by tax collectors during the day. To escape from this situation, people abandoned their village and went to live in the forest. As the story indicates, the relationship between the king and his subjects, especially the rural population, could often be strained. Kings frequently tried to fill their coffers by demanding high taxes, and peasants particularly found such demands oppressive. Escaping into the forest remained an option as reflected in the Jataka story. Meanwhile, other strategies aimed at increasing production to meet the growing demand for taxes and also came to be adopted. अब बात होती है गंधटिंडु जटाका. एक स्टोरी है जिसमें बताते हैं कि देयर इज अ किंग, ही वाज वेरी विकेट. वो अपने रूलर्स का बिल्कुल ध्यान नहीं रखता था. एंड वंस व्हाट हैपेंड वाज ही डिस्गाइज्ड हिमसेल्फ एज एन ऑर्डिनरी मैन, और वो गया अपनी सब्जेक्ट्स के पास एंड जब पूछा किंग के बारे में, सो एवरीबडी कर्स्ड द किंग, एवरीबडी सेड बैड थिंग्स अबाउट द किंग, दैट हाउ अनसेटिस्फाइड दे आर, डिससेटिस्फाइड दे आर विद द किंग एंड हिज रूल एंड हिज रेन. तो दिस स्टोरी टेल्स कि इट्स नॉट नेसेसरी कि हर बार अगर किंग्स की प्रेज लिखी तो द किंग वॉज गुड. What the subjects thought of the king, it's rarely available to us, what the common man thought. Okay. And वो बताते हैं कि the kings often, because of course they wanted to praise themselves, they wanted to build गोल्ड कॉइन्स एंड स्टैचूज एंड स्कल्पचर्स, इन सब चीज़ों के लिए. सो दे वांटेड अ लॉट ऑफ मनी, तो वो टैक्स को इंक्रीज करते थे एंड द पुअर एंड द ऑर्डिनरी पीपल हैड टू सफ़र. इसका वो लोग कैसे रिटालिएट करते थे? सम ऑफ देम वेंट टू लिव इन द फॉरेस्ट, बिकॉज फॉरेस्ट एक ऐसा एरिया था जहाँ पर किंग का रूल बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं होता था, किंग के ऑर्डर्स इतने फॉलो नहीं होते थे, बिकॉज ऑफ कोर्स जो ट्राइबल्स होते थे या जो फॉरेस्ट में रहते थे, इट वाज नॉट रियली अंडर द किंग्स रूल. तो वो या तो अपनी विलेज को छोड़ के फॉरेस्ट में रहने चले जाते थे, या फिर वो फिर कोशिश करते थे कि अपना ही एग्रीकल्चर बढ़ाओ ताकि टैक्सेस को पे कर सके. Strategy, okay, let's see this first. The Sudarshan, beautiful lake in Gujarat. Sudarshan is very beautiful, that's the meaning. In Gujarat, find Girnar on map 2. I've already shown you in the previous video कि गिरनार में major rock edict था. If you remember, it is in Gujarat. The Sudarshan lake was an artificial reservoir. We know about it from a rock inscription 2nd century CE in Sanskrit composed to record the achievements of the Shaka ruler Rudraman. एक शाका रूलर था whose name was रुद्रमान. उन्होंने एक सुदर्शन लेक के कंस्ट्रक्शन के बारे में एक संस्कृत में इंस्क्रिप्शन हमें मिलता है. What does the inscription say? The inscription mentions that the lake with embankments and water channels was built by a local governor during the rule of the Mauryas. However, a terrible storm broke the embankments and water gushed out of the lake. Rudraman, who was then ruling in the area, claimed to have got the lake repaired using his own resources without imposing any tax on his subjects. And the inscription on the same rock, 5th century, mentions how one of the rulers of the Gupta dynasty got the lake repaired once again. तो यहाँ पर हमें ये भी देखने को मिलता है कि हाउ रूलर्स कैसे रुद्रमान ने अपनी पॉकेट से विदाउट इम्पोजिंग एनी एक्स्ट्रा टैक्स ऑन दी पीपल सुदर्शन लेक को ठीक कराया था. Why did rulers make arrangements for irrigation? Of course, it was necessary. अगर rulers को tax चाहिए था तो what was the revenue? What was the source of the tax? It was from agriculture. And अगर agriculture, अगर irrigation ही अच्छा नहीं है, so how would agriculture be done? तो irrigation was a means ताकि agriculture अच्छे से हो पाए and the tax would have been continued. Of course, agriculture was a primary source of, income for most of the people at that time. So agriculture was important. Strategies for increasing production. Now हमने ये पहले देखा था कि increasing in heavy taxes से बचने के लिए some people used to go to the forest and some people would increase their production. Now what were the strategies they adopted कि जिससे production को increase कर सके? Here, one such strategy was the shift to plough agriculture, which spread in fertile alluvial river valleys such as those of the Ganga and the Kaveri from 6th century BCE. The iron-tipped ploughshare was used to turn the alluvial soil in areas which had high rainfall. Moreover, in some parts of the Ganga Valley, production of paddy was dramatically increased by the introduction of transplantation, although this meant back-breaking work for the producer. Plowed field हमें सबको पता है कि क्या होता है. The soil is turned over and over, मतलब उसको खुरेद के so that the nutrients get mixed properly, soil को air मिलती रहे for proper aeration ताकि पानी अच्छे से नीचे तक जा सके. So plowing is a very good method ताकि plants को अच्छे से breathe कर सके and they can grow and develop healthy. Okay, another one was shifting to transplantation. What is transplantation? It is used for paddy cultivation in areas where water is plentiful. जहाँ बहुत सारा पानी होता है वहाँ पे rice को उगाने के लिए transplantation is used. Here seeds are first broadcast. When the saplings have grown, they are transplanted in waterlogged fields. This ensures a higher ratio of survival of saplings and higher yields. हमने देखा ही होगा वीडियोस में एंड बहुत सारी ऑनलाइन भी कि पहले सीड्स जब छोटे छोटे सैपलिंग्स बन जाते हैं राइस के, तो फिर उसको उस ज़मीन में से निकाल के ऐसी जगह पर रहता है वेयर देयर इज़ लॉट ऑफ वाटर. पानी ऐसे लॉग्ड होता है, मतलब एक लेयर होती है पूरी पानी की, एंड देयर देन द सैपलिंग्स आर प्लांटेड. तो इससे जो क्रॉप है वो और बेटर, हेल्दी एंड हायर चांसेस ऑफ सर्वाइवल होते हैं उसके. सो दिस वॉज ऑफकोर्स बैक ब्रेकिंग, क्योंकि सबसे पहले सीड्स को स्कैटर करो, सैपलिंग्स हो जाए, फिर एक एक सैपलिंग को सॉइल में से निकाल के दूसरी जगह लगाओ इन अ प्रॉपर लाइन एंड प्रॉपर डिस्टेंस फ्रॉम ईच अदर. ओके. While the iron ploughshare led to growth in agricultural productivity, its use was restricted to certain parts of the subcontinent. Cultivators in areas which were semi-arid, such as parts of Punjab and Rajasthan, did not adopt it till the 20th century. And those living in hilly tracts in the northeastern and central parts of the subcontinent practiced hoe agriculture, which was much better suited to the terrain. तो प्लाव एग्रीकल्चर आयरन प्लाउज का यूज़ होता था, बट नॉट एवरीवेयर. जैसे पंजाब एंड राजस्थान में तो बहुत लंबे टाइम तक प्लाव का यूज़ नहीं होता था, प्लाउड फील्ड का यूज़ नहीं होता था. नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न साइड में तो नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न एंड सेंट्रल साइड में हो का यूज़ होता था. व्हाट इज़ द डिफरेंस बिटवीन प्लाव एंड हो? यू कैन यूजली गो ऑनलाइन एंड चेक इट आउट. ओके. Another strategy जो ये adopt करते थे, this is the third strategy, was to increase agriculture production, was the use of irrigation through wells and tanks, and less commonly canals. Communities as well as individuals organized the construction of irrigation works. The latter, usually powerful men including kings, often recorded such activities in inscriptions. तो जब भी ऐसा होता था कि एग्रीकल्चर इंक्रीज हो गया, कैनल्स बनी या फिर इरिगेशन के उन्होंने काम करे, जैसे हमने सुदर्शन लेक का करा, तो द किंग्स एंड द पावरफुल मैन यूज्ड टू रिकॉर्ड इट इन देयर इंस्क्रिप्शन, ताकि आगे जनरेशन के लिए पता रखी हो कि येस दे डिड समथिंग लाइक दिस. सो हियर गिवन आर 3 वेज जिससे उन्होंने प्रोडक्शन को इंक्रीज करा. The importance of boundaries. Manusmriti is one of the best known legal texts of early India. Written in Sanskrit and compiled between 2nd century BC and 2nd century CE, this is what the text advises the king to do. Seeing that in the world controversies constantly arise due to the ignorance of boundaries, he should have concealed boundary markers, buried stones, bones, cows, hair, chaff, ashes, potsherds, and dried cow dung, bricks, coal, pebbles, and sand. He should also have other similar substances that would not decay in the soil, buried as hidden markers at the intersection of boundaries. तो यहाँ पर ताकि प्रॉपर बाउंड्रीज डिमार्केशन हो पाए, उसके लिए द मनुस्मृति एडवाइजेस रूलर्स कि ऐसी चीज़ें जो सॉइल में इजीली डिके नहीं होगी, जैसे पेबल्स हो गया, ड्राइड काउ डंग हो गया, बोन्स हो गए, उन चीज़ों को यू शुड फर्स्ट ले इन द ग्राउंड एंड देन कंसील इट विद अ लेयर ऑफ सॉइल, ताकि ये पता ना चले कि मतलब कोई इसको ऊपर से हटा ना सके या ये वो वेयर ऑफ ना हो सके. तो वेन एवर देर इज़ अ कॉन्ट्रोवर्सी अराइजिंग कि किसकी लैंड है, कहाँ तक लैंड है, सो दे कुड जस्ट डिग अप द लैंड एंड उनको वो बॉर्डर जो है वो जो उन्होंने बनाई है बाउंड्री, दैट वुड बी विजिबल. Would these boundary markers have been adequate to resolve dispute? We don't know. They may have been, क्योंकि ज़्यादा easily decay नहीं होती है, but still it's difficult. आपको मतलब पूरा वो लैंड खोदना एंड बार बार अलग अलग जगह पर उसको डिगिंग करनी पड़ती होगी एंड वो लेयर बाय लेयर ऊपर चढ़ के वो बाउंड्रीज पर धीरे धीरे करके मतलब कहीं ना कहीं बहुत डीप हो जाती होगी. सो उसके प्रोज एंड कॉन्स है, बट ऑफकोर्स दे वर नॉट वेरी यूजफुल मीन्स उस टाइम पर जो यूज़ कर सकते होंगे. Differences in rural society. While these technologies often led to an increase in production, the benefits were very uneven. What is evident is that there was a growing differentiation amongst people engaged in agriculture. Stories, especially within the Buddhist tradition, refer to landless agricultural laborers, small peasants, as well as large landholders. The term Gahapati was often used in Pali texts to designate the second and third categories. The large landholders, as well as the village headmen, whose position was often hereditary, emerged as powerful figures and often exercised control over the cultivators. तो हमने देखा कि वो प्रोडक्शन तो इंक्रीज हो रहा था, लेकिन उसका बेनिफिट सभी को इक्वली नहीं मिल रहा था, एंड उसमें डिफरेंसेस थे बिटवीन द पीपल. देयर वर सम हु वर वेरी पुअर, डिड नॉट हैव देयर ओन लैंड, दे वर लैंडलेस एंड दे वर वर्किंग as slaves or on other people's lands and all that. दूसरी तरफ there were people like the village headmen जिसकी पोजिशन हेरिडिटरी होती थी, और the Gahapati. So these were the second, third categories, मतलब बहुत हायर कैटेगरी में थे, एंड दे वर वेरी पावरफुल एंड रिच एंड वेल्दी. तो उसके बेनिफिट्स इंक्रीज एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्शन के बेनिफिट्स हर किसी को एक जैसे नहीं मिले. अर्ली तमिल लिटरेचर, the Sangam text, Tamil Sangam text, also mentioned different categories of people living in the villages. Large landowners or Velalar, please remember all these terms. So the different categories mentioned in Tamil text are Velalar, that is large landowners, plowmen or the Uzavar, and slaves or Adimai. It is likely that these differences were based on differential access to land, labor, and some of the new technologies. In such a situation, questions of control over land must have become crucial, as these were often discussed in legal text. So this would have been always a bone of contention कि whose land, who will control the land. ये problems तो हमेशा से रही है और आज भी होती ही है कि आज भी socialism, capitalism में that should the resources and land be under the government or not, and etc. Okay, so ये सारी चीज़ें उस टाइम पर भी common थी, and the Velalar, the Uzavar, the Adimai, these are the different categories of people. Gahapati. A Gahapati was the owner, master or head of a household who exercised control over the women, children, slaves, and workers who shared a common residence. He was also the owner of the resources, land, animals, and other things that belongs to the household. Gaha means house. We know Rajgaha, remember? So Gahapati matlab the owner of the house, the head of the house. Sometimes the term was used as a marker of status for men belonging to the urban elite, including wealthy merchants. तो कभी कभी Gahapati जो वेल्दी मर्चेंट्स होते थे सिटी में रह रहे, उनको भी ये टर्म डेजिग्नेट किया जाता था एज फॉर रिस्पेक्ट. Lands, grants, and new rural elites. From the early centuries the common era, we find grants of lands being made, many of which were recorded in inscriptions. Many of these inscriptions were on stone, but most on copper plates, which are probably given as a record of the transactions to those who received the land. The records that have survived are generally about grants to religious institutions or to Brahmins. So after the from which time सेंचुरीज ऑफ कॉमन एरा मतलब 100 CE 200 इस टाइम से ही हमें ये दिखता है कि लैंड्स को ग्रांट किया जाता था, बिग बिग पीस ऑफ लैंड को डोनेट किया जाता था, एंड द डिटेल्स वर रिटन ऑन अ कॉपर प्लेट मोर देन अ स्टोन. और वो कॉपर प्लेट जिसको भी लैंड मिलती थी एज अ ग्रांट एज अ डोनेशन, वो उसको दी जाती थी कॉपर प्लेट, और उस पर सारी डिटेल्स होती थी कि हु वाज द वन and who is the one who is receiving, who gave the land and when and how much land, and all these information was necessary. The record that have survived are generally about grants to generally हमें पता चलता है कि grants जो थे वो religious institution, temples वगैरह या ब्राह्मण्स को दिए जाते थे, not everybody. Most inscriptions were in Sanskrit. In some cases, and especially from the 7th century onwards, part of the inscription was in Sanskrit, while the rest was in a local language such as Tamil or Telugu. Let us look at one such inscription more closely. The 7th century CE से common था कि थोड़ा inscription संस्कृत में लिखा है and the rest of the part is written in Tamil or the other local language. एक inscription का यहाँ पर example दिया हुआ है. Prabhavati Gupta was the daughter of the ruler Chandragupta II. Okay. चंद्रगुप्ता, नाउ प्लीज रिमेंबर जो हमने पहले चंद्रगुप्ता पढ़ा, ही वाज द वन हु एस्टैब्लिश्ड द मौर्यन डायनेस्टी इन 321 BCE. So Chandragupta Maurya is a Mauryan ruler and Chandragupta is a Gupta ruler. So his daughter was Prabhavati Gupta. She was married into another important ruling family of the Vakatakas, okay, who were powerful in the Deccan. So Deccan में Vakatakas were very powerful, and there Prabhavati Gupta was married off. According to the Sanskrit legal text, women were not supposed to have independent access to resources such as land. However, the inscription indicates that Prabhavati had access to land which she then granted. This may have been because she was a queen, one of the few known from early Indian history, and her situation was therefore exceptional. It is also possible that the provisions of legal text were not uniformly implemented. तो ये था कि women were not allowed to own the resources independently, वो उनके husband के, father के, भाई etc. के नाम पर ही रहेगी. But this is of course there were exceptions always. Prabhavati Gupta was one such female, लेकिन it is shown that she did control the land. The land was under her control, and she also granted the land to other people. So these exceptions are found everywhere. They are very common, and they can be two reasons. हो सकता है कि Prabhavati Gupta was a queen, so there was some exceptions made to her, or maybe that the policies were not very properly implemented, and apart from Prabhavati Gupta there were others too who did something like that. Land grants such as this one have been found in several parts of the country. There were regional variations in the sizes of land donated, ranking from small plots to vast stretches of the uncultivated land, and the rights given to donees, the recipients of the grant. The impact of land grants is a subject of heated debate among historians. Some feel that the land grants were part of strategy adopted by rural lineages to extend agriculture to new areas. Others suggest that land grants were indicative of weakening political power, as kings were losing control over their samantas. They tried to win allies by making grants of lands. They also feel that kings tried to project themselves as supermen, and because they were losing control, they wanted to present at least a facade of power, So what were the two reasons that they did some land grants? It's written right here in the last para. The Harsha Charita, Life in a Small Village. The Harsha Charita is a biography of Harshavardhan, the ruler of Kannauj, composed in Sanskrit by his court poet Banabhatta, 7th century CE. This is an excerpt from the text, an extremely rare representation of life in a settlement on the outskirts of a forest in Vindhyas. The outskirts being for most part for forest, many parcels of rice land, threshing ground and arable land were being appointed by small farmers. It was mainly spade culture given to owing to the difficulty of ploughing, that sparsely scattered fields covered with grass with their few clear spaces, their black soil stiff as black iron. There were people moving along with bundles of bark, countless sacks of plucked flowers, loads of flax and hemp bundles, quantities of honey, peacocks, all feathers, breadths of wax, logs, and grass. Village wives hastened en route for neighboring villages, all intent on thoughts of sale and bearing on other heads baskets filled with various gathered forest fruits. So this is how the life in the village used to be. How much would you classify the people described in the how would you classify described in the text in terms of their occupations? Of course, one would be the person who would sell all these things, one would be the one who would collect all these things, one would be the one who would transport these things. There can be many occupations. This is another one. An Agrahara was land granted to a Brahmin who was usually exempted from paying land revenue and other dues to the king, and was often given the right to collect dues from the local people. So Agrahar means that एक ब्राह्मण को लैंड देना, लेकिन उस ब्राह्मण को उस लैंड के लिए कोई टैक्स पे करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, but he can certainly collect taxes from his own subjects. Prabhati Gupta and the village of Tangona. This is what Prabhati Gupta states in an inscription. She commands the Grama Kutumbinas, householders of peasants living in the village. Grama Kutumbinas. Gram means village, Kutumbi means people living. So Gram Kutumbinas, people living in village, Brahmins and other living in the village of Tanguna. Be it known to you that on 12th lunar day of the bright fortnight of Kartika, we have, in order to increase our religious merits, donated this village with the pouring out of water to the Acharya, teacher Channel Swamin. You should obey all his commands. We confer on him that the following exemptions typical of Agrahara. This village is not to be entered by soldiers or policemen, except from the obligation to provide grass, animal hides or seeds, and charcoal of two ruling officers. Exempts from the royal negotiate of purchasing, fermenting liquors, and digging. It's exempt from the right to mines and khadira. Trees exempt from the obligation to supply flowers and milk. It is donated together with the right this is done. The charter has been written in the 13th regnal year. It has been engraved by Chakradasa. So it's very clear कि अग्रहार एक लैंड को जब ब्राह्मण को ग्रांट में दिया जाता था, तो what were the things that had to be followed. पुलिस में एंटर नहीं कर सकता, कोर्टेड एंटर नहीं कर सकता, को टैक्स देने की ज़रूरत नहीं, and all that. Land grants provide some insight into the relationship between cultivators and the state. However, these were people who were often beyond the reach of officials or samantas. Pastoralists, fisherfolk and hunter-gatherers, mobile or semi-sedentary artisans and shifting cultivators. Generally, such groups did not keep detailed records of their life and transaction because they used to move a lot from one place to another, Okay. What were the things reduced in the village? यहाँ पर दिख रहा है कि grass है, fruits है, timber है, etc. So you can write this question from the box very easily. Find out whether plough, agriculture, irrigation and transplantation are prevalent in your state. If not, there are any gadget systems in use. Okay, this is. So with this, the part 4 is over. Part 5 is over. 4 and 5.